Hi everyone, welcome. This is my presentation. My name is Shelley Lawson. I've been a teacher for more than 20 years. I have two master's degrees, one in applied linguistics and one in media and culture. I'm currently doing my PhD in English language and applied linguistics. So nice to meet you. Let's get started. Let me share my screen with you. Share. Oops, let's get started on the right page. My presentation today is about using WhatsApp to promote English conversation. Especially concerned with what type of content you should use if you use it in the classroom. I should mention that when I started this research, it was before COVID-19, so the world has changed very slightly since then. First of all, WhatsApp is not endorsed by any colleges in the UAE. I simply used it because my students liked this app. Be careful if you do choose to use it. You might share inappropriate material, it might be a security concern, or you might have an informal relationship with your students. So it's inadvisable unless you can do it in a professional manner. In fact, though, the world has changed since this time, and now we are all communicating online. So online education is now mainstream. We are even communicating online right now. So using WhatsApp as a tool to increase motivation could be a possibility because we are forced into this environment. Okay, so I think the world's changed slightly. Let's begin. Today, I don't have a quick quiz. We're going to ask some questions, bring old research ideas into the present. Then we're going to talk about my contribution, my research, discussion and recommendations, limitations and future research. If you have any questions, please email me. My email is at the end of the presentation. So first of all, what would you answer to? If you saw these posts on social media, which ones would you comment on? What would you comment on? Let's have a look through them. This one is an article about the UAE's first astronaut returning to Earth. Would you comment on it? Would you say something about this? Would you comment on a quick question? Do you know which festival takes place next week? Or how about a video about cyberbullying? Would you have something to say about that? This one is a picture of my children in Halloween costumes. Would you comment on that? Would you send a reply? And finally, a quick question. Would you like to be an astronaut? Would you reply? We'll answer some of these questions later on. Looking at research from the past, my main message is get with it. Lots of previous research contains how-to guides, how to use social media in the classroom, and also recommends that it needs to be incorporated almost for its own sake. Here's some technology, now use it. For me, that is the wrong way round. I will explain what I mean later on. Another argument made in some papers is that social media provide new opportunities. Really? Are they new? I thought social media had been around for a pretty long time. And another one, all these old-fashioned teachers, they don't know anything about technology. We need to help them use it. Excuse me, I've been using technology now for a very long time during my teaching. I don't feel that I know nothing about it. So, and some of this research is from 2019, and I'm not young, you know. So get with it. Teachers now are being forced, especially in the current situation, to use technology whether they like it or not. I don't think it's a question of whether or not we have to convince them anymore. We just simply do it. Also, some studies still use Facebook as a form of social media that they are investigating. In my opinion, this is very old. There are other more modern forms of social media that our students use, which don't include Facebook generally. My argument is that social media is now normal in our lives and in education, actually. Using technology is normal in education. Even in 2015, they said it. That's before now, before 2020. I mean, let's come into the present. Many papers argue that social media is very good for learning purposes. My argument is, no, it's not. It's not good for formal learning. It's good for social purposes, perhaps social learning, and it's informal. I would like to look at what social media can do for you in your class, rather than imposing social media and then asking, okay, what do I do with this? Okay, so look at the affordances, what you could use it for. These are some of the things: collaboration, interactivity, sharing. It's all between people. Okay, if you look at uses and gratifications theory from media, people use media for specific purposes. You don't have the media first and then think of the purposes. You think of the purposes first, and then you have your medium that you want to use. There is a different type of conversation that takes place on social media, with pictures, with images, emoticons, and so on. Social learning can take place, yeah, because social media are social. Vygotsky is a great person to read for this. The More Knowledgeable Other, we will look at this later in my research. And I'm thinking about what affordances here we can use to encourage engagement in classroom topics. Okay, I'm looking for engagement. Engagement and learning are two different things. Okay. Here are my research questions. What kind of WhatsApp post generates the most interest in an English conversation class? I gave students two different types or several different types of posts and had a look to see which ones generated the most interest. I also looked at which users and groups were commenting most, and what the learners' opinions were of using social media outside the classroom. I had two classes, and they all received 2 to 3 media posts per week outside of class time. One class only got visual messages, both personal and impersonal. The other class received only text, questions, direct questions, and articles, personal and impersonal. I chose WhatsApp because the students said they used it. They said they used other platforms as well, but Facebook was not one of them. Students also signed a consent form, and they completed a survey at the end of the course. Let's move on to my results. As you can see, here we have Group A. They mainly didn't reply. The only times that they replied were my own personal posts. As for Group B, who received only text, they replied far more frequently, particularly to direct questions, but not news articles. Here's a summary. So if I posted about myself, anything about myself, whether it be pictures, videos, or stories, advice, I received a lot of replies. If my post was about my students, they also received a lot of replies. If I posted something that was impersonal, an article, video, image, anything at all, I received 0 replies. That's significant. So for videos, only the personal ones were interesting for the students. For the images, again, only the personal one. For questions, yes, personal questions and general knowledge questions generated a lot of replies. Hard news and feature news articles, 0 replies. No one was interested in these. So I also looked at the different popular conversations. So for instance, do you know which festival takes place next week? This was a popular conversation. Students, as you can see, replied sometimes with emojis, sometimes also in Arabic. And these are the connections between students. So you can see the student here and the number of connections and posts. This is the number of posts that they made. Some students are communicating more than others. Yeah, this one maybe not so much. Another popular conversation, what costume should I wear for my Halloween party? So again, there's quite a lot of collaboration here. Students sent different pictures of costumes and also how to make some costumes. So it was really an interesting exercise. And I chose one of their ideas for my costume in the end. Again, you can see some students are participating more than others. If you look at the results overall, heavy users, you can see here, some students are heavy users and other students are light users. Some students didn't make any comments at all. Some students commented in Arabic, while others used just English. When I asked students, did they enjoy using social media outside class, and most of them replied in the affirmative, which I expected. The most interesting question was why they actually liked it. And a lot of them said they found it easy to communicate with the teacher when they used WhatsApp. In fact, this was mentioned more than how useful it was, or how much they learned from it. Okay, so again, this comes back to my main argument that social media are social. They're used for collaboration, communication, not necessarily formal learning. When I compared both groups, I found that the group that received only visual communications thought they only learned a little bit from the messages, whereas the other group thought that they learned a bit more. So perhaps that says something about the visual mode. Discussion and recommendations. Purely visual conversation was difficult. It elicited fewer responses. Students receiving visual communication felt they only learned a little. Students actually mixed modes when they communicated. Very important here, the content type. Formal and impersonal posts elicited 0 responses. None whatsoever. Why? Because it's not a use or a gratification. It's not what you use social media for. Social media is not for formal learning. So informal and impersonal posts elicited more responses, as well as personal and general knowledge questions. So that brings me back to the affordances of social media and how students mentioned the practical aspects in their survey. It was easy to disseminate information, collaboration, communication, this type of thing. Fun and informal learning aspects. Well, they collaborated very well on how to make a Halloween costume. So all of these seem to appear, even in my research. Participation. We saw that some students were replying in Arabic. The informal environment may lend itself to this also, their emojis. However, there are some students who are still not participating, and that's something that needs to be considered as well. So here are my recommendations. If you're going to use social media in the classroom, you probably should use personal content and direct questions accompanied by text, not simply images. Use authentic tasks. This is something that is recommended in language teaching anyway, but especially here, it worked well here with the Halloween costume decision made by the students. And also, there is a different way of communicating that would be different from class. Still, in spite of this, shy students need encouragement to participate. My limitations, my sample size was small. It could be useful to use a larger sample size. It's hard to tell whether the difference in groups was due to the different modalities or whether this was because class A was very quiet class. It could be. So try different groups or a within subjects design. You will also need to make changes if you have a male teacher and female students or vice versa. WhatsApp may not be acceptable in some situations. And the messages were anonymous, so I couldn't tie the messages with the survey content. So it would be better to record the demographic data for that. And also, you could try with different platforms, Moodle or Blackboard. However, you probably should consider the affordances of each one before deciding to use it. What is it used for? What do the students use it for? Yeah, don't just choose something and put it into your lesson. You need to think of what are the uses and gratifications first. And I think that's all. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, please email me. I have some reference list here. If you need any of the references, please let me know. I think one of them is missing, so please, which I just noticed. So please let me know. And that's it. I'm going to stop right there. Let me see. Stop sharing. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.